Right, it is 1:03 p.m. on the East Coast. We will go ahead and get started. Just a couple of quick reminders. This meeting again is being live streamed on our YouTube channel right now, and it is also being recorded and will be available after the meeting. Please make sure that your name is properly displayed and correct that if need be. And with that, I am going to turn over opening remarks to Commissioner Plummer.
Hey, Steve, you caught me off guard. Thank you, though. It's
My
really great.
apologies, Commissioner.
That's all right. You got me. I want to thank everyone who's able to join us for taking the time to join us this afternoon. It's always a pleasure to be able to connect with you, and I hope it's the same for you. It's really an honor to be the designated federal officer to this local leadership board, particularly in a presidential year. We wanted to have this last minute opportunity to discuss pressing issues concerns, as well as ideas and preparation tips as we head into the general election. Every time we meet, I know the EAC staff always take away something from these meetings, and we hope you do too. So I anticipate there's going to be concerns on resources, election mail, managing that process, early voting, election day, UPS delivery timing and performance, interactions with poll workers, and perhaps in some jurisdictions there's still a need for poll workers. We understand these challenges, but we have full confidence in you and know that you are all focused and looking for ways to make the process work no matter the circumstance and challenge. So you're smart and capable administrators, and we're grateful that you're here to share that knowledge with us as well as your colleagues. So while you are focused on your local processes, it's important that you stay connected with each other as we enter the final stages of this election. There's going to be many stakeholders and poll watchers, for example, who will enter the process for the first time and critique the performance of your office. But we have each other's support and we have full confidence in your abilities. Time and time again, we've shown it as election community how we're able to overcome the challenges that each election brings. In our efforts to continue your efforts to be the backbone of our democratic process and really how our republic elects its leadership. So we at the EAC are very confident that you'll execute these elections, and every preparatory action you take is designed for that, to make you more election ready. And it does take a lot of effort to prepare. The days are probably getting a little longer and more time is compressed. But it'll be here before you know it, and the preparation will be well worth it. It is what you do now that will help ensure the successful election. So as we enter the final weeks of preparation, we want you to know that your messaging to your voters and stakeholders is very important. We'd like to know, what are your areas of concern? What do you and your colleagues need to hear and know? What is it that you hope that the public will hear? So we want to assist you in amplifying your voices. We have a myriad of resources available to help you communicate. Well, wow. Help you communicate with your voters, the media, and other members of the public. We want the public to know that you are the trusted sources, but also of communication, but also stewards of the democratic foundation of our republic. It's a great thing that it's a great thing what you are doing to ensure people have every opportunity to vote and have their voices heard. So remember, we're here to support you in any way we can. Our staff has now over 160 years of experience and great resources to help you think through and address many of the issues that you may or may not expect. We appreciate all that you do, not only in your service to the LLC community, but in service to your local communities. So thank you. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Steve.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. With that, we are going to start by calling the roll. I'm going to call the roll by state. So please note that your microphone was muted as you entered the meeting, and please unmute your microphone to announce that you are present. So with that, I am going to call the roll starting with Alabama. Andrea LaCroix.
Present.
James Tatum. Alaska, Julie Hussman and Lori Wilson. Arizona, Scott Jarrett.
Present.
Raylene Richards. Arkansas, Phyllis Rhines. California, Donna Johnston.
Good morning, present.
Good morning, Ryan Ronco.
Good morning, present.
Great. Colorado, Carly Kappas.
Good morning.
Good morning, Lori Mitchell.
Good morning.
Connecticut, Antoinette Spinelli.
Here, present.
Delaware, David Gillespie. Doris Young.
Present.
Florida, Mark Early.
Present.
Wesley Wilcox.
Good afternoon, present.
Georgia, Deidre Holden. Charlotte Sosby. Hawaii, Jade Fountain Tanagawa. Lyndon Yoshioka. Idaho, Lon Colton. Illinois, Don Gray. Indiana, Jessica Bailey.
Present.
Shelley Scepter. Iowa, Denise Beyer.
Present.
Eric Van Lanker.
Present.
Kansas, Rick Hypo.
Present.
Jamie Shu.
Present.
Kentucky, Kevin Mooney. Susan Lamb.
Present.
Louisiana, Bridget Hanna.
Present.
Steve Rayborn. Maine, Lisa Goodwin.
Present.
Kathleen Montejo.
Present.
Maryland, Rui Lavoie. Barry Jackson.
Present, and Rui sends her regrets. She's under the weather today.
Oh, sorry to hear that. Thanks, Barry. Massachusetts, Sergio Cornelio. Danielle Sickard.
Good afternoon, present.
Michigan, Mary Clark.
Present.
Elizabeth Hundley.
Present.
Minnesota, Marilee Peterson. Michael Stahlberger.
Present.
Mississippi, Leroy Lacey.
Present.
Van Lowry.
He's under the weather. He had surgery.
Oh, thanks. I'm sorry to hear that. Missouri, Shane Scholler. Brianna Lennon.
Present.
Nebraska. Oh, great. Nebraska, Tracy Overstreet.
Present.
Amy Nelson.
I know Amy's joining later. She has a board meeting.
Okay, sounds good. Nevada, Jessica Kopke. New Hampshire, Sherry Farrell. Nicole Merrill. New Jersey, Maureen Bugden.
Present.
Shauna Mac Pollock. New Mexico, Amanda Lopez Askin.
Present.
Naomi Maestas. New York, Dustin Zarni. Eric Height. North Carolina, Sarah Levere.
Present.
Kelly Harris Hopkins.
Present.
North Dakota, Darlene Carpenter.
Present.
Dawn Roan.
Present.
Ohio, Sherry Poland. Brian Sleeth. Oklahoma, Gwen Freeman. Callie Sander. Oregon, Tracy Krivanko.
Here. Present.
Tim Scott.
Present.
Pennsylvania, Tim Benyo. Thad Hall. Rhode Island, Nick Lima.
Here.
Jackie Schultz.
Present.
South Carolina, Marie Smalls. South Dakota, Julie Bartling.
Present.
Tennessee, Tammy Smith.
I'm here.
Texas, Jennifer Doinoff.
I'm here.
Shannon Lackey.
Shannon had jury duty today, so she'd rather be here.
Sounds good. Utah, Ricky Hatch. Arky Rowley.
Here.
Vermont, Sarah Haskins.
Present.
Tracy Borst.
Present.
Virginia, Barbara Tabb. Washington, Garth Fell.
Excited to be here, Steve.
Great. Skip Moore.
Present.
Great. West Virginia, Michelle Holly.
Here.
Linda Huggins. Wisconsin, Wendy Christensen.
Present.
Diane Konanen.
Here.
Great. Wyoming, Deborah Lee. Julie Freese.
Here.
Great. Vice Chair Palmer, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate it.
I think with that, we'll now turn the meeting over to Executive Director Brianna Schlaetz.
Thank you, Steve. I'm Brianna Schlaetz, the EAC's Executive Director. I'll be brief, but I just wanted to take the time to thank you for joining this meeting. We understand this is a very busy time for all of you, and that Election Day is just one finish line. There's still a lot of work that you'll be doing after the polls have closed, and we understand how important it is to be communicating to the public and how that communication is essential to building confidence in our process and highlighting the security and transparency of elections. The EAC has been particularly focused on developing communication resources so that you can tailor those and use those. We understand that, whether it's 70 days before Election Day or 30 days after, I want you to know that the EAC is here to support you. We appreciate all the effort and work that you're doing to serve voters, and we are looking for ways that we can assist and help you in that endeavor. One of the benefits of the LLC is that members represent all corners of the country and communities of all shapes and sizes. This board is an excellent place for you to voice concerns, needs, or share best practices with one another. So no matter what state you're coming from, how big or small your community is, I'd like you just to walk away with knowing that EAC is here to help you however we can, and so are your colleagues. So I want you to know that you're not alone in this. As Executive Director, I have the pleasure of working with EAC staff to make sure that we hear the feedback from board meetings like this. So we try to make sure that feedback is reflected in the work that we do year round. So we are, listening, taking notes, and trying to make sure that the ideas that come out of this forum we act on. This is incredibly valuable as we look toward November 5th, the certification deadlines in each of your states, and even 2025 once the dust has settled. So I want to thank you for the work that you continually do to protect our democracy. And then as a federal partner, we hope you can feel our agency's appreciation, and we hope you also recognize that we are here to help you in any way that we can. We appreciate your incredible contributions to this election, and we look forward to the discussion today. So thank you. I apologize, Steve. I don't know who's next.
Worries, appreciate it. Thanks so much for the remarks, Executive Director Schlotz. With that, we'll turn it over to Vice Chair Palmer to do the business portion of the meeting.
So I think the next thing on the agenda is that we're going to approve the agenda. I think that's a step we have to take. So if we could just bring that up, and then I'll give perhaps a
Motion to approve.
okay. People have had I believe members have had an opportunity to review this. This is the agenda. We have a motion.
Second.
I'll second.
Okay. I'm going to call the ayes and nays.
Aye.
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 Okay,
Aye.
Aye.
and the nays. Hearing no nays, the agenda is adopted. Okay. Steve, what do we have next on the agenda here?
Yep. Next up is to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Okay. So the members have had an opportunity to review the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the 2024 annual meeting?
Motion to
I'll
approve.
second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. I'm going to call the yeas and the nays.
Aye.
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 Okay,
Aye.
Aye.
hearing the
Aye.
ayes
Aye.
and the nays. Hearing no nays, the minutes are approved from the 2024 annual meeting. So next on the agenda, I believe, Steve, is the election of one member of the Executive Committee representing Region 5.
Yes, absolutely. So in accordance with the LLC bylaws, the EAC solicited nominations on behalf of the Executive Committee for a vacancy for Region 5 that was a representative on the Executive Committee. The only valid nomination received was for Maureen Bugden. Under Article 5, Section 3 of the bylaws, a candidate may be elected by acclamation if the number of candidates is equal to the number of seats to be elected. As that's the situation here, additional nominations may not be accepted from the floor. I would ask for an acclamation from the Region 5 members in attendance that Maureen Bugden should be elected to the Executive Committee. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
Great, hearing none opposed, the nomination is carried by acclamation. Vice Chair Palmer, I will turn it back to you.
So at this point, what we have is on the agenda is a bylaws committee update. Do we have the member of the bylaws committee that would be providing that update?
Good morning, Commissioner. It is me, Carly. I'm going to provide that update if you are ready.
We are ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good morning, everybody. I'm Carly Koppas. I am also your vice chair of the LLC. I just wanted to give a brief update on the bylaws committee. Right now, we are currently considering amendments to the bylaws that would make the executive committee election process a little more standardized. As you just saw, we kind of had to hold off on filling our vacancy in Region 5 until we held this meeting. So we're wanting to do a little bit of changes and clean up in that process. Also to be able to vote outside of a normal standard meeting such as this. A couple of ideas that we have is not have the vacancy linger for a really long time. So making sure that we can have our appointed members on the LLC, but also our elected members on the executive committee have enough time to get together and get work done for the majority of all of us. The bylaws committee is also open to any suggestion edits from members, and we are going to vote on any of those changes that we come up with over the next couple of months in our upcoming meeting in April in North Carolina. So I'm going to put in the chat my email address. So if you can provide me with any ideas to the bylaws that you have that you would like to see changed. Also, if you have any ideas for topics of future meetings as well, I would greatly appreciate that. And that is our current bylaws committee update, Commissioner Palmer.
Thank you. So based on the agenda, I think we've completed the preliminary. Are there any other preliminary issues, Steve, that we need to take care of?
No, I don't believe so. So with that, I'm happy to transition into our first discussion topic.
Let's move forward.
Okay, sounds good. So again, want to thank everybody for being with us today. The discussion portion of our agenda is primarily focused on providing feedback to the EAC, and your role as advisory board members is critically important to the agency's mission to best serve you and your colleagues across the country. Before I jump into the discussion questions, I did want to make a couple of notes. As you may be aware, the LLC has a dedicated online community. These questions will be posted there after the meeting. If you have additional comments, please feel free to use that space to continue this conversation. If you're not currently a member of the LLC community, you'll be getting an invitation that'll probably come from me or generated from the Roundtable platform to join following this meeting. Each region also has a separate community space, and I'll be inviting folks into those specific regional communities as well. For these discussion questions, please feel free to unmute your microphone if you have a comment. If others are speaking, please feel free to use the hand raise function. To raise your hand in the Zoom meeting, click on the React button. That's the heart icon at the bottom of your screen, and select Raise Hand. You're also welcome to add comments in the chat as well. So I'll put the first couple of questions in the chat so that you have those in front of you too, but want to open this up to the group. Have you experienced any specific challenges during the elections that you have conducted so far in 2024? And what topics would be most helpful for your regional committees to discuss between now and the November 5th election? Okay. Jennifer, I think I saw your hand raised. Feel free to unmute.
Yes, thank you. I think what I've seen so far is escalating, is going to escalate in November, is the passion for this election season and the need to really make sure that not only ourselves, but our poll workers are trained in de-escalation and just self-awareness of their own personal space. We did have earlier this year in our primary some folks that are, we call them enthusiasts here in Texas, but some election enthusiasts that showed up at poll workers' houses and were questioning them after the election and saying that they were from the Secretary of State's office. So I think it's important to alert our poll workers about these things and let them know that, you know, the Secretary of State's office is not going to come to their house to ask them questions. So if someone does that, we in Texas don't have confidentiality for election workers or poll workers. Elected officials do, so our counterparts that are elected have that. But if we're appointed EAs, we don't have that. And I don't know how many on the call do, but that's something we're looking for in future legislation just to protect our poll workers. And then another big topic here, and it's because we've experienced it all year long, is emergency preparedness. We've had wildfires and floods. We've had shootings. We've had active shooter incidents that have had us shelter in place during elections. We've had so many things go on already this year. And it's really enlightened us to the fact that, oh, we've had communication failures too. We had a big AT&T outage during the primary. So these are things that we're really working on in Texas and focusing on this year on top of everything else. So the challenge for us is trying to figure out how to fit all this training into the little bit of time that we have and not scare off poll workers.
That's great. I really appreciate that, Jennifer. And see next up, Nick, feel free to go ahead.
Thanks, Steve, and good afternoon and good morning, everyone. So the Region 5 Northeast Regional Committee met on Thursday via Zoom, and we discussed a few topics that are, some of which are unique to our region, I think others which are shared by everyone around the country. First and foremost was postal service delivery, delayed mail delivery times for mail ballots and applications and registrations. And in particular, I mean, something that I don't think is unique to us either, is the sort of Tuesday low volume non-delivery of mail. And I know there's operational reasons for that in processing centers on Sundays, and it's reflected in Tuesday's mail, but Tuesday's election day. Tuesdays are deadline day in many cases for most states. And a lot of that mail that would normally come on Tuesday, I think comes Wednesday, and that's problematic in a lot of our states. Obviously in New England, Northeast, snow, weather events, tropical storms, and hurricanes in October are always a concern. Only those are things we have to prepare for, but are out of our control. But something that is unique to New England and a couple of other states in the Midwest are our municipal nature, and how that has often restricted our access to funding. Elections are oftentimes at the very bottom of the tier list in terms of offices in municipal local governments. And staffing is also low. And in many cases, like in Vermont, election officials have 5 or 6 or 7 or 9 duties, ranging from treasurer to tax collector to town clerk, et cetera. So there's a lot of burnout in our region. And I know that's a national problem as well. But the reasons for it are a little bit different here. And in some cases, it's being overworked and also being understaffed. So one thing we did discuss was, we know there's been a lot of rounds of HAVA funding in recent years going towards election equipment upgrades, election security, but we haven't really seen much funding in the way of staff. And I know that's more difficult. It needs to be more consistent because you don't want to hire people and then have to get rid of them a couple of years later when the funding dries up. But it's the FTEs that are running elections, whether it's testing equipment or doing data entry in the office, or hiring poll workers, and many of our offices struggle with that. We make the cases to our local governments, our state governments, but the funding just usually does not materialize. So that's an ongoing issue, and it can actually help with the burnout problem too, if it can be solved in the long term. 2 other quick things. When we were talking about maybe things that the EAC could do, some sort of marketing campaign. This is sort of low-hanging fruit for communicating to voters, because we see this a lot. People don't really have a good perspective on how every state's election laws are different. So when you move from state to state, and we see a lot of people moving around the country, when they get into that new state, they don't know the deadlines are different. They don't know the early voting and the procedures are different. And just getting that information out there to try and prompt people to contact the local election officials. And that leads to the last item we discussed, which is very similar to the NAS campaign, Trusted Info. We see it from candidates, we see it from campaigns, we see it all over social media, wrong election information out there, wrong dates, wrong deadlines, wrong times, and not just driving voters towards state election offices, but even to local election offices, especially with local or special elections, to try and get that correct information to the voters. Our resources are obviously the most limited of all at the local level. So, our ability to respond and mitigate to those disinformation, misinformation issues is the least compared to the state level or the national level. So anything that can be done to try and encourage voters to get that information directly from local election officials and state offices as well would help us out a lot.
Really appreciate that, Nick. That's great, and really appreciate the work you did getting the region organized into a meeting. It looked like you guys had a great discussion. So really appreciate all that work. Next up is Susan Lamb. Go ahead, Susan.
Thank you, and I'm glad to be a part of this group. I noticed that our Secretary of State has posted a rumor. It's a web page that he has that actually goes through, and when he sees something coming out for misinformation, disinformation, he puts factual information on this rumor web page on his website, and which I really appreciate and value. And I've actually pointed a couple of people to that website so that they can watch for misinformation, disinformation. And I don't know if other states are doing this, but I found that it's very helpful to our voters, and to know that it's a state office that has this information. I feel like that, like Nick was saying, that you've got the authority to be able to present that information, and I think it's very, very helpful. So, oh yeah, you got it. Rumor control, there it is. It's awesome.
That's great. Really appreciate the update, Susan, and thanks, Brianna, for dropping that link in the chat too. That's a great resources. So let's see. Next up, I've got Ricky Hatch. Go for it, Ricky.
Okay, let me make sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, coming through.
Oh, perfect. Okay, good. Just one quick thing on election worker security. I saw a presentation from a professor. I believe it's Professor Pate at Chicago University. I'll share the link in the chat, but he did some research on political violence. And what shocks me is that the political violence, the research that he did shows the political violence is just as likely on both sides of the aisle, regardless of who wins. And his presentation also talked about how the likelihood of political violence occurring after the election is far greater than the likelihood of it happening before the election, which I've always been focused on leading up to election day and voters in person and things like that. But afterwards, as we're doing the canvass and things like that, this has caused me to want to expand or extend that the security protocols and processes that we have in place after election day, because after seeing that presentation, it sounds like there's a pretty high risk, especially if something shocking happens with the results, and the candidate who was presumed to be winning turns out not to be. So that's just one thing that I'd share.
That's a great addition, Ricky. Appreciate the thoughts, and want to just highlight for a few folks that there's a great discussion happening in the chat. Really appreciate everybody who's adding some comments in there. One thing in particular that I wanted to highlight was from my colleague at the EAC, Cami, dropped in a link to a training video that was developed by the American Psychological Association in partnership with EAC, and it's designed specifically to use during poll worker training classes. It's very short, just a few minutes, and is a good way to kind of strategize in terms of working in those more stressful situations. So thanks, Cami, for dropping that link in the chat. Lots of good discussion there too, but also kind of on the theme of poll workers, just wanted to preview something for everybody too before we get to our next set of questions. That the EAC will be continuing throughout this election period to try to promote the need for poll workers and to help you all promote the great work that your poll workers are doing and to recognize some of that work. So just want to flag that for everybody to keep an eye out for some toolkit resources coming down the line within the next couple of weeks. So hope to be able to share more information on that soon, but really excited to see some of these products coming out, and hope it can be helpful in terms of recognizing poll workers coming forward. To keep moving along with the agenda, the next couple of questions I wanted to drop into the chat are, So on the theme of EAC resources, we've been releasing resources to try to help election officials with communications efforts and improve communications on election security in particular. I think this goes nicely with, dovetails nicely with the comments that Ricky was saying earlier. These resources include some videos, work products, and toolkits. So the questions I'm going to drop in the chat are, among these or other EAC work products, what have you found to be the most or least effective resources for your office? And is there anything critical that is missing from these materials? Also, what additional information or resources would be helpful either before the November election or for future election cycles? So again, I will drop those in the chat here. Eric, I see your hand is raised. Thanks so much. Go for it.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. It's more of what we found has worked really well for us are the things there at EAC. What works well for us, and I have a staff that's very good at this, but I know my peers are not so much, and they're kind of afraid to do social media things. Because they don't know what to say or what sort of graphics to use and things. So some of the toolkits that the EAC, with some of the things that are already provided, some graphics that help them along the way. And I've been promoting that a lot. You had sent one out earlier, and I'm sorry, I can't remember. It was about poll recruitment day or poll worker recruitment day or something else. But I got on our chat group with all of our folks, and I sent that link to them to use as well, because seriously, I think that's the best way that we can communicate with our voters now is through our social media. And I keep continually trying to get my peers across the state of Iowa to do these things. And that is something that makes it so much more easy for them and so much more confident in doing it. It's a great communication tool. So, I mean, any topic, anything that you can help with a baseline kit for even us folks that know how to use it and use it often, we still also like those ideas with different graphics and messages. So we appreciate that.
That's great to hear, Eric. Really appreciate it. And Donna, I see your hand is raised.
Oh, thank you, Steve. One of the things that we really like from EAC is the post-election process toolkit, because the question is always, why does it take so long to certify? Why does it, for California especially? So we found those templates to be very helpful and has helped our staff with outreach to the community about what the election process is post-election. So we really appreciate those.
That's great to hear, Donna. Thanks so much. And Carly, go ahead.
Thank you. One of the things that I have been pushing to a lot of our newer election officials here in Colorado is the readiness checklist, just because it has all the links to the different resources as well. So that's one of the things that I do greatly appreciate is having that readiness checklist, but then it also links to all the other EAC resources in there, like the toolkits. So that's one of my top ones that I use often and refer to as often.
That's great to hear. Glad to hear that's helpful. Couple things I wanted to point out in the chat too. Really good conversation in there. There's been a couple of comments, particularly from Tammy Smith in Tennessee, talking about some of the behind the scenes work that they do and dropping some resources into the chat there. So I recommend taking a look there. And then also a couple of links from Kathy Montejo and Mark Early as well. There's so just some great information in the chat. It looks like know that everybody everybody's doing really amazing work, and it's great to have a place here to gather all that information. The chat and all of that information, I'll go ahead and put that in the in our local leadership council community, so that way we have some access to that after the meeting as well. But lots of good resources here. So in addition to some of the materials that are that we've already put out, is there anything in particular that would be helpful to hear from the EAC or helpful for us to provide in the time between now and the November election? I know it's coming up extremely quickly. We're very, very near the voting period already. So any thoughts there on what the EAC can provide now for this election, or in the future for future elections? And I think I see Garth, I think you had your hand up first. Go for it.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. And this may actually exist and I just may not know where it is, but it would be great to have a one-pager of contact information that's critical numbers for federal agencies, you know, the U.S. Postal Inspection Service, the FBI, you know, just a one-pager where all that's in a really quick, easy to digest format, so that we don't have to be kind of pulling that all together from a federal level ourselves.
That absolutely makes sense. That's a great plan, something that I'm sure we can pull some information together for you too. And Jennifer, go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I saw this question in the chat, and it's something I know that we talk about a lot here in Texas too, and I'm not sure how other states utilize this, but how to work with your law enforcement, how to work with your emergency preparedness people. I think that would be useful. And it, again, may be something that exists and I just haven't found it, but I think that's always useful. I think we're going to probably start using those things more often than not in the future.
That's great, and definitely would encourage folks to lean on the LLC community and the clearinghouse community. Those are a couple of really good resources for finding what folks have used across the country. So we may not have something, but if we do, it's probably going to be there. Probably be able to find it in the search there. And if it doesn't exist, I'm sure somebody's done it. So it always encourage folks to ask the questions there too. But really, really good ideas, and glad to hear that. And thanks, Ricky, for sharing that in the chat. This is how Weber County, Utah worked with their law enforcement, is listed there. So appreciate you sharing that information, Ricky. And I know a lot of folks have been, yes, and Wesley, that's a great resource too. The Safe and Secure Elections, Committee for Safe and Secure Elections has some booklets for law enforcement, guidelines for law enforcement. And those booklets, yes, Wesley just mentioned that they have those available for all 50 states now, which is, I know it's a large undertaking, so that could be a very helpful thing just in terms of comparing laws across the country. I will pause for some additional comments for just a moment.
Steve, this is Commissioner Palmer. I know we're still formulating an approach, but have there been some topics on, we're going to hear from USPS, but are there some products that we have available on just paying attention to the details on postal office procedures and that sort of thing?
Yeah, that's a great flag. So I think this was one of the resources that was mentioned in the discussion earlier, but our post-election processes toolkit is really a valuable resource for explaining those harder to explain elections processes. This has detailed information that you can customize for your community that can help explain things from post-election audits to the certification process. And that post-election period is obviously a critical one for voter information, especially as votes are still being cast and counted in the hours and days after the polls close, and a time when folks are going to need some critical information. So that toolkit exists. Can try to drop a link into the chat here for folks. The nice thing about that too is I know there's not much time between now and November, but it is the sort of product where you can pre-fill in some of that information and have it ready to go. Also share real briefly too, we have some voter education materials that, in talking about designing voter education materials that I think are helpful. Our designing materials, it's a toolkit for designing voter education materials, includes some resources that help you with things like providing information in plain language and thinking about the providing information in plain language in simple terms and really thinking about your audience. So how much information does somebody need? Do they need just a small little bit of information, just a bite-sized amount of information, or is it more of a somebody who's a member of the media or somebody who's much more knowledgeable about the election process in general? Maybe they need a fuller explanation. So kind of organizing those resources as well. So I'll work on dropping those in the chat for just a moment, but that's a great flag. And a lot of our resources too, we intend those to be used and customized and really encourage folks to make those their own. No need to keep EAC seals on anything. You can replace those with yours and make them really customized for your community. And Susan, I see your hand raised. Go ahead.
Thank you. Just a couple of things. At our last State County Clerks Association meeting, our State Board of Election was telling us that we should all contact our postmasters in our collective counties to make sure they understand that our absentee ballots are not supposed to be, the mail-in ballots are not supposed to leave our counties. And I was curious if anybody else in other states has had this. I have found out the name of my postmaster here in Fayette County. I have reached out via email, obviously have not heard back. And so I'm curious if other states are having the same conversation.
Could you repeat the part about, did you say vote by mail ballots not leaving your county? Is that what you said?
Right. When a person, a voter requests an absentee ballot and it is mailed out of our office to that voter, in Kentucky, we have postmasters, and we used to have the ability to just submit the mail around within our own counties, but now they send them to more regional areas. And and I don't know if this is something that is on a federal level, but it was handed down to us by our State Board of Election to advise our postmaster that this year, the absentee ballots are not supposed to leave our counties. I saw some of the chats in there where, I mean, obviously in some states, I can only imagine that you have such large jurisdictions that it would be impossible to do. But I was just curious if other states have heard this before.
Here in Colorado, I'm in a kind of a smaller jurisdiction, and all of our mail, regardless, that's dropped in the mail, goes to Denver and is processed and then comes right back to us, even if it's just going up the street here. And the reason that you want that to happen is because they have the proper safety mechanisms and scanning things for substances, as well as other things that could be that could injure, the recipient. So, and that's something that is totally out of our control. That's just, so it sounds like that's probably, like I said, we want the mail to go down there just because of these scans.
I was just going to add to that. Tammy Patrick has a presentation that talks about this, about exactly what you're talking about, how you can bypass and save a couple of days posted processing time through the Postal Service by keeping it local. However, if you do that, what she said is it misses some of the scans. So if you have a ballot tracking application, it would not be tracked through the Postal Service, so you wouldn't be receiving those updates. So that would be a question that I would ask your local postmaster is, if we keep it local and it just goes through you, is it still subject to the scanning and tracking available through the Postal Service? Because to me, that's a deal breaker if you can't track the ballot through them. I'd rather have it take an extra day or two to that functionality.
This is a great discussion, and it segues exceptionally nicely into the next part of the meeting. But I see Commissioner Palmer. Yes, go for it.
Sorry to before we move on.
Great.
One additional issue is that, the EAC receives regular inquiries from state and local officials regarding federal record protections for personal information. And in response, our General Counsel's Office and the Commission has developed a compilation of legal citations and website links that can assist election officials with best practices for protecting personal information in the context of public records requests. So that can be relevant to your office or to your poll workers. So the forthcoming document, I'm not sure it's quite up there yet, but it will be publicly available on the EAC website under best practices for public records requests. And so I want to make sure that you are all aware of that. You can pull that down. And that is a document we've created to help you understand what FOIA protects when it comes to personal information. So you have the best information available when you make those decisions. I'll turn it back to you, Steve.
Thanks, Commissioner. That's a great flag for everybody in the meeting. And wanted to highlight a couple of things that Cami has dropped in the chat as well. So we have an election mail checklist, just to kind of help walk through some of the things to keep an eye out there, and also some information on additional memo on election mail that to take a look at in terms of other resources. In our public records request, there was a news article this morning. I saw it come through an election line that linked to our public records request best practices. So that's also getting some media attention, which is exciting to see. But hopefully that is something that folks will find helpful here as well. So I think, unless there are any other comments on this topic, since we've kind of gone into election mail, we're a couple minutes ahead of schedule, but wanted to check and see if Adrian, if you're on, and if you and Stephen are available and ready to present for the USPS.
Hi, Steve. How are you?
I'm good, Adrian. Thanks so much for joining me.
Absolutely. I can't tell though if Steve is on. My Steve is on. And
yeah,
if
I'm on
you're
the call.
here. Okay, great. There you go. My driver. But I am ready, Steve. If you want me to just jump right in, I'd love to do so.
Okay, well, great. Yeah, I'll just give a brief introduction to the group and really appreciate you both being here today. So we've heard from our local leadership council members fairly consistently that they're always interested in hearing more from USPS, and really excited to have with us today Adrian Marshall, the Executive Director for Election and Government Mail Services from the U.S. Postal Service, and also Stephen Carter, manager in the election and government mail services section. So really appreciate you both joining, and I will turn it over to you, Adrienne. Thanks so much. Thank
you, Steve. And it's really good to be here. We really appreciate the invitation, and so it's always good to be in this space during this really critical year for all of us with the federal election happening in November. So Steve, if you want to pop up the presentation, I can jump right in. So I like to start all of our conversations really with our role in the election process. And so we have a very clear and defined role, and that is to process, transport, and deliver the nation's election mail, including ballots. We are committed to fulfilling our role in the electoral process, and we provide a secure, efficient, and effective way for citizens to participate when policymakers decide to use mail as part of their elections. The Postal Service has a robust and tested process for proper handling and timely delivery of election mail. Every federal election cycle, we make efforts across the nation to inform local and state election officials about mailing procedures, our operational standards, and our recommended best practices for utilizing the mail. I'd also like to say that we don't have any role in determining election laws or deadlines. We also don't advocate for vote by mail. What we say is if citizens decide to cast their ballot through the mail, it's safe, it's secure, and it's efficient. So there was a lot of work going into all of our activities for this year, and I just wanted to mention a few of the training and education activities that we're doing just most recently. So we've been educating and training all year long, and really since the creation of this new group, the Election and Government Mail Services, we jumped right in and started training. So I just wanted to highlight a few things on the slide. Of course, with an organization of our size, we're constantly educating and training our employees on our key messages, our processes and procedures to ensure that we have reached all of our employees down to the lowest level. I have 4 field specialists who are really aligned with the retail and delivery structure of our organization. And they have been really busy auditing retail and delivery units and our processing facilities to ensure operational readiness. In addition, we also have a newly created team called the Service Quality Team. And within that team, there's an excellence performance team and they also go out and audit each of the facilities. And so we trained them on the audit process back in May. In February, March, and April of this year, we engaged with area leadership and cross-functional leaders in transportation and logistics. We are currently hosting a mandated training on our Hero Profile, which is a platform that we use for training that accommodates really, really large audiences. And then, of course, an organization of our size, over 640,000 employees, we need that bandwidth to be able to reach out. Most recently, we facilitated training with both our processing regions, Eastern and Western, and in that group were plant managers and leadership in mail processing. Internally, more information, we kicked off the Election Mail Task Force in July, and that's a joint effort between all of our unions and management associations. This is another set of boots on the ground and eyes to watch the ballots as they move through the system. Election mail inspections, we call them EMIs. They're formerly known as observation mail conditions. They're being conducted now for the remaining primary states, and again in October in all of our processing facilities that process letters and flats for the general election. I mentioned the Learn and Grow and the education series in our Hero platform. We started those training sessions again with both our delivery and retail partners and our processing operations employees. The SQA team, the Service Quality Assurance team, again, our focus, their main focus is on processing. One of the activities and initiatives that they do is they create a weekly newsletter from Lewis, our Postmaster General. And he mentions several key topics for the week, as well as reminders. So that's a new initiative that we have. And then just as we have in past years, we will distribute our extraordinary measures memo and our postmarking memo. Those will be posted on the website. And then the election extraordinary measures activities that are mandated and some that are optional. And we'll cover that again. I have a slide that goes in further detail about what those extraordinary measures are. Externally, we've been busy as well. And so I wanted to share some of the most recent activities that we have. Since 2022, we have been meeting regularly with our stakeholders across the election landscape, including state and local election administrators, federal agencies, Congress, the mailing industry, and non-governmental organizations. We have a dedicated team that is directly engaged at national and state and local levels. The 50 managers of customer relations, they serve as points of contact with election officials. And so this ongoing engagement will go through November, of course. These partnerships allow us to really quickly identify issues, address them, and resolve them if they arise. And then, of course, the critical and important relationship that we have with our election community will continue to foster that. A list of some of the most recent EGMS, Election and Government Mail Services, outreach and activities. I won't recite all of these, but I do want to highlight the collaboration and partnership with EAC. We just most recently recorded a video, a series with Commissioner Hovland and Tammy Patrick and with the inspectors. And so that was really designed for the new election officials. So that was a very good partnership there. We've also attended the NAS and NASIC conference this summer. And then Steve and I will be attending the conference in Detroit in September. So operational readiness at scale, we've again talked about our longstanding processes and procedures. And so all year long, we have conducted several activities. And so we'll continue that. We will continue to educate and train our employees, of course, as well as processing facilities and delivery and retail units perform all clear checks. They do clean sweep checks. And then our employees are documenting election mail when it's entered into our system. And we'll continue to do that as well. And then just as we have in previous general elections, we will deploy extraordinary measures between October 21st and November 26th, unless there's a runoff election, and we'll extend it to move ballots entered close to or election day and or the state's return deadline. I heard the conversation earlier about the law. I think I'm stating this correctly. The law in, I think this state was Kentucky, that did not want the absentee ballots to leave the county. And then I heard the conversation about the transparency of the scan event. So it was really a good conversation. I'm glad I was able to hear that. We don't like deviating from our normal process because you lose visibility on the mail piece. And so as we get closer to the general election, we keep the mail in its normal flow. And about 4 or 5 days prior to, we will hold that mail and we will do local turnarounds. And so that mail will stay in that facility. It'll bypass our processing facilities. And it's a way for us to capture, rescue those ballots that are entered late by the voter. And then, of course, our processing facilities will set up some holdouts and sort plans specifically for boards of election. And that mail will be jackpotted directly for delivery the next day. On the election mail security front, it's of course a priority for us. The U.S. Postal Service backs its mail service with the protection of its own federal law enforcement agency, the U.S. Postal Inspection Service. They are the oldest federal law enforcement agency in the country, and they are primary law enforcement, crime prevention, and security. They are the primary law enforcement, crime prevention, and security arm of the Postal Service. The unique status of election mail and political mail makes their security a top priority for the Postal Service and the Postal Inspection Service during every federal cycle. So think about the Inspection Service as protecting our facilities, protecting the sanctity of the mail, protecting our employees, and of course, protecting election officials. If election officials feel that they were threatened in any way, the Postal Service has a 1-877 and 24-hour hotline that you see on the screen. I did hear some conversation about having those contacts ready and handy and available. Also, if election officials suspect fraud, they can also reach out to the Inspection Service. They are engaged with local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies. The OIG, they're more monitoring and compliance. They perform election mail audits twice during a federal election, once or before during the primary season, and then once again before the general election. They also investigate employees who appear as bad actors, but they both also team up with local, state, and federal agencies. And I think that brings us to questions and answers.
Thank you so much, Adrienne. And before I open it up to the rest of the membership, I just wanted to share a couple of comments. One that came directly to me from Mary Clark in Michigan, noting that election mail service is a particular issue in Michigan. There's a new requirement in the state to provide postage paid return on applications for ballots and ballots themselves, and that mail pieces can be the delivery of mail pieces can be unpredictable in part because of this new requirement, as mail pieces have to be hand counted and logged and submitted to the state in order to be billed before the jurisdiction has the resources before they're reimbursed to be able to pay for the postage for those items. So just wanted to mention that as a comment that came in from Michigan. And then also there was a comment in the chat from Tammy in Tennessee, asking if there are any changes that are currently happening to distribution centers. And Tammy noted that all of their mail goes to Nashville and then comes right back so that after it gets scanned.
So thank you so much for asking. So, we are engaged in a network transformation. However, because it's a federal election year, the Postmaster General has decided to pause any new plants. So only the existing RPDCs that we're calling them, the regional processing and distribution centers that have already been established, there will be none until 2025. So no new facilities coming up between now and the election. But thanks for asking.
That's great. And there's one more question coming in from the chat from Ricky as well. When the Postal Service keeps the ballots locally processed, I think you mentioned 4 days before Election Day, without sending them to a regional processing facility, are those envelopes postmarked, and are they able to be tracked like ballots that are processed at further facilities?
So thank you for that question. So when we deviate from our normal process, which is what we don't like to do, but we realize that some voters will not return their ballots in time to meet service standards, of course. So when we hold those ballots locally, they are instructed to postmark those ballots. When we take custody, whether it's dropped in the box outside or it comes across the retail counter, the employees are instructed to postmark those. But deviating from that process, of course, you lose the visibility. We don't have any scanning equipment in retail sites that like we do on the processing side. So that's the downside of rescuing it and taking it out of the system, is that we lose visibility on it.
Absolutely, that makes sense. And just kind of going through some additional comments in the chat here. From Mark Early, there was a comment just saying, just really appreciating their local postal service office. Michael Stahlberger asked a great question, asking if there are any postal rate changes scheduled between now and November, and noting that there was a rate change between the date that they mailed their ballots for the August election and the August election that they held. So any expected changes to postal rates coming up?
I think I recalled something that was filed most recently, but I'm sorry I don't have it directly in front of me. And I think that was slated for the final for the year. But again, don't quote me on that. I'm not sure because I don't have the information, but I can certainly get the answer to that, Steve. And if you could respond on my behalf, that would be great. I'll get the answer for you and send it over.
That'd be fantastic. That'd be great. I'd be more than happy to distribute that to the group. And then just also want to encourage folks to raise your hand or jump into the conversation as well. But a couple of notes. Donna Johnston mentioned that USPS Informed Delivery is a great tool in addition to other ballot tracking applications that you may have. And I use Informed Delivery myself. It's fantastic. So definitely would highlight that. And one thing I learned in Indianapolis at the Postal Forum this year was that businesses can sign up for Informed Delivery now. And that may be something that's helpful for particularly smaller offices may have access to that. And there was another comment, let's see. Another comment from Mark Early, just speaking of visibility, that they use voter-specific intelligent mail barcodes for their mail ballots, both outbound and inbound. And that level of tracking has been helpful for them for troubleshooting complaints from voters and with basic oversight, transparency into the process of where ballots are in the mail stream.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Carly, if you don't mind, I can have you come off mute and ask your question in here. I'm happy to read it too if you'd prefer.
That's fine. I just didn't want to interrupt the conversation and not lose my thought either.
Yeah.
Hi, Carly.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks.
Good to see you again. So one of the things that we have been seeing, not only in our state in Colorado, but some other states, is with the, I think I'll try and use Texas's term, election enthusiasts. I'm going to try and use that instead of the other words we talk about. What we have seen them doing is they have been requesting our bills from USPS in trying to compare that billing to how many actual undeliverable ballots we actually are reporting out that we have received, and they're not meshing. And so one of my questions is, would we be able to actually get access to that documents that you were talking about according to the election mail, as far as the election mail log sheets or anything like that, to have a stronger stance against the claims of fraud, that there is something fishy going on with the USPS, especially around undeliverable ballots? The downward rabbit hole that they're trying to do with that is we're not reporting as many undeliverables as we're supposedly getting billed for. So then somebody in USPS is collecting those ballots and, doing or potentially going to do nefarious things. Obviously, we have a great working relationship with you guys and we want to be able to defend you. So that would be my question, is what other documentation would we be able to have so we can combat those claims?
So I'm going to reach out to Steve in just a second and let him help me answer this. But let me just say about the log sheets. The log sheets are used when we have a bulk, when a large quantity, like it's dropping at a BMEU or at the plant directly or a DDU. We track that, but we track those ballots on a log. When it comes to single pieces like you're referring to, we don't have a log for single pieces. That's way too much for us to try to capture, right? But now, in terms of the BRM logs, Steve, that's the piece I want you to help me out with. Do you know if when they're working the BRM mail and that volume, is that volume recorded on a log? Because I think that's what Carly is asking us for.
Yeah, I forget the specific form number, but Carly, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but then you're getting your business supply mail pieces back, usually there's an invoice or a statement with that. Obviously, that's the record that you're maintaining as far as, or what I'm assuming what the enthusiasts are requesting as far as the actual number then that you were invoiced for, and that compares to a number that you're reporting elsewhere, and those two aren't meshing. Yeah. So yeah, there's an invoice associated with all business supply mail that's provided back to the mailer. If it's not provided physically, it's maintained electronically and can be provided. As far as speaking to what else could be done, I know, again, in Colorado, Brenda works closely with your entire election community there. We might have to look at what other possibilities or like what information we would have that might be beneficial. Off the top of my head, I don't know exactly what that would be.
Yeah, we can certainly take it back though, Carly, and see if we can provide any additional documentation to you.
That'd be wonderful. I appreciate it. And we do appreciate Brenda as well. And we're probably going to try and see if we can get a meeting with her in the next couple of weeks. So if you want to join that, I'll make sure and have her give you that information. So thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
There's another question in the chat from Charlotte. Charlotte, I'm happy to share this on your behalf, but if you wanted to speak to this, feel free to go ahead.
Yeah, I apologize for joining so late, but yeah, hello from Georgia. Yes, so we're using a out-of-state vendor who mails our ballots. And in 2020, we were told that the ballots, when we tracked, if it stated that the ballot was out for mail, that it didn't necessarily mean that it was out for mail, but it was sitting in a basket to be mailed. And I just wanted to make sure that it's being communicated to the staff that these ballots should be handled expeditiously and not scanned to say that they're in the basket to be mailed, but they're actually being mailed. Just wanted to make sure that was being done.
And what office is this? Charlotte, is this a particular county or can you give me more? Yeah.
Yes, so our county used Fort Orange to mail out our ballots. And so they handled the mailing them out. And then we would be provided with the list that allowed us to track the ballots. And we would see on the list that the ballot was out for mail. And we were told by Fort Orange that they found that when it said it was out for mail, that it wasn't really actually out for mail. It was sitting in a basket to be mailed. But yeah, we even saw that it would say that the ballot was on its way to the person's address. So we would say, yeah, it should be mailed today. You should get it in the post office in your box today. And we would find that that was not happening.
Okay. So I'm going to assume that you're talking about scan data that the mail service provider is providing you. Absolutely. Okay. So sometimes what they see and our actual scan events don't line up together. The last scan that you're going to see in finalizing processing before it gets to delivery is a 919 scan event. That is the last hit on that mail piece before it goes out to delivery. We don't have delivered scans. Unless you have a certified piece or priority piece of mail or express mail piece, that is the only time that you will see a delivered scan when that scan event is made. On a first class piece, the last hit you're going to see on that machine is going to be the 919 processing hit in the plant.
Okay.
Delivered scan.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
There's a brief conversation in the chat too between Mark and Ricky about the scanning of inbound ballots, specifically within the window 4 days before Election Day. And Ricky, Mark, feel free to jump in here as well. But the way that I'm understanding the question is that what is happening in the 4 days specifically before Election Day with mail ballots? Are those being processed locally? And if so, I assume that those are not able to be scanned. Is that right?
So I'm thinking when he's saying inbound, is this inbound to election officials? Is this a completed ballot from the voter to the election official?
I believe so.
Yes.
Mark, do you want to jump in?
I think that's a yes.
Okay. So, so 4 days, 3 or 4 days before the general election, it's going to bypass operations unless it's dropped like in a collection box outside of the operation. Sometimes mail facilities do have blue collection boxes. Then it will follow the correct process. If it's entered on the street by a customer putting it in their mailbox for a carrier to pick up, or if it's brought across the retail window or out of the collection box in front of the post office, we isolate those ballots, we keep them locally and turn them right around back to the election official. So you will not see scan events on those ballots.
If it's not a local drop, though, it would still go through the normal scanning, I would imagine. Say it was out of county and had to get here.
Yes. Well, it depends on, okay, so Florida, for instance, our managers of customer relations, they coordinate those handoffs and those touch points. And sometimes they'll do like a 50-mile radius or 25-mile radius. So it just depends. It could be still in the same county, stay in the same county. But again, it just depends on the distance there.
Yeah, I thought I saw some of ours being scanned coming through Jacksonville still, but I wasn't real sure if it was the total volume, but that makes sense what you're saying.
Okay.
So just to make sure I understand then, for voters who drop their ballots in either their mailbox or in a local blue mailbox, if we are using, in Utah, we use Ballot Tracks, which is a private company that uses postal scan data to inform voters when ballots have been received back. It sounds to me like we would not be notifying the voters that the scanned returned ballot envelope is on its way back to us, because for those 4 days, that's not being recorded as the ballot's actually not going to a regional processing facility.
That's exactly right, Ricky. And that's the reason that we don't like deviating from our normal process, because we want transparency. We want the visibility. We want to see the ballot moving through the system. We also, I don't outreach to voters much. I am going to record a podcast. And in that podcast, what I say to voters is request your ballot early and return your ballot at least 1 week prior to the election. And then that visibility, of course, is there.
Thank you.
I think that's a great reminder and great thing that, of course, we try to emphasize to our voters as well, like all voters across the country, that returning early is super, super important. Also want to recognize Garth. I see your hand raised. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Executive Director Marshall, for taking our questions and being on the hot seat. I think we all value the post office and the relationship we have, and you guys do great work for us. About postmarks, I'm from Washington State, and we are a state in which postmarks determine whether or not something is on time. And so I just want to make sure that that postmarking, particularly of postage paid mail, is a consistent practice across the country, and it's something that you guys message ahead of elections to ensure that plants are postmarking mail on time and getting that kind of check for us to make sure that it's been clocked in essentially. For the voters.
Well, thank you. So yes, we do share. We have a little guide that shows 19 states that require postmarks and the 32 states that don't require postmarks. And so we are constantly having those conversations and education with our employees. Again, our attempt, we try to postmark every single piece. Sometimes it's not possible. It either bypasses an AFCS, which is our canceller, and gets sorted maybe with some metered mail that is already, prepaid postage. But in Washington State, we do make sure that all of our employees are aware of what your rule and your law is in Washington State. In West Virginia too, yes.
That's great. Well, I see Jennifer, I see your hand is raised. Just a to let everybody know, we do have a few minutes left, so still have time for a little bit of conversation, but just want to give folks a time call there. And Jennifer, go ahead.
Thank you. I want to thank Adrienne for being here. She also came to our state association, so she does even the little things. She presented for our state association conference in January in Amarillo, which I know for most of y'all doesn't mean anything, but it's cold in Texas in Amarillo in January. So thank you for trekking out. And I just wanted to say I would love to have the information about your podcast because I think consistency in our messaging is very important. I'd love to hear what you're saying to voters so that we can make sure that we're giving the same advice.
Oh, I would love to. So Jennifer, it is going to be posted. We have, it's called Mailing It, and it's mailing it without a G on mailing it. And we have a series of podcasts, and I'm going to record this session on Thursday. And I would expect that it would be posted a week from Thursday, that it will be posted online. And then I can certainly share that link with you, Steve, so you can share it with the members once I record it and it goes and it's posted.
That would be great. Yeah, that would be, I'm sure the full membership would be interested in hearing that. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And I think I did see another question or comment from Florida.
I was just chiming in along with several others. I'm not sure if we're on the list of requiring postmarks. We definitely need them. Ours is for kind of a unique situation. For a mail ballot, if a voter dies shortly after completing the ballot, say within a day, we count it as long as their death happened before the postmark. But we had one where someone died on one day and it didn't have a postmark. So
After the postmark, not before.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
Okay. And there are some circumstances that prevent us from postmarking pieces, and I'll give you an example. If mail comes from a designating facility, we want, of course, we want the cancellation process to work through our AFCS, our canceller machines. However, if one reaches the delivery unit and it has not been postmarked, then we cannot compromise the integrity of the mail piece if we can't determine when we took custody. And so that piece would not get a postmark.
It did look like based on the IMB tracking that the dates didn't line up for us to count it. So we didn't count it, but there was no postmark. So it was a little more complicated.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, it's difficult. You got a lot to do.
Well, I don't want to cut off the conversation. I do want to emphasize that we'll have plenty of opportunity. Adrienne, if you want to share any materials with us, I'm happy to get that out to the board, and same to the board members. If you have any questions that you'd like for us to help direct to USPS, we're more than happy to assist in any way we can. Adrienne, Steve, thank you so much for your presentation. Really greatly appreciate you joining and really appreciate everybody contributing to the conversation today. This has been exceptionally helpful.
Thank you. We appreciate the invitation. Happy to be here.
Great.
Thank you.
That's great. Well, it is 2:31, so I'm going to turn the meeting back over to Vice Chair Palmer to if you have any final remarks and to lead us to adjournment.
Well, thank you, Stephen. I appreciate it. And I'm really thankful for each of you being a part of this. We wish you luck, and we stand with you as you go into the election season. That's really it for the agenda today. Well, I want to thank our guests from United States Postal Service. And I think that was a great conversation. I'm sure we'll be continuing that. With that, let's go ahead and we're going to adjourn the meeting. I will now entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any objection to it is moved and seconded. This body is adjourned. The meeting, I will now take a voice vote to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
All opposed, say nay. The ayes have it, and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all, and good luck in November.
Thank you.